one of the guys in the class just blurted out, well, just be better. And I'm like, that's it. We don't really need to overcomplicate this.
San Diego 911 emergency. You need to come right away. There's a man with a gun and it's loaded. Receiving emergency signal from
4 George, 1141. We've got a white king out there. We need paramedics close right.
all available units. Roll code that way.
Welcome to the De-Escalation Conversations podcast. You've heard me talk about ILEETA a lot. That's the International Law Enforcement Educators and Trainers Association. Their conference is in March of every year, and in 2023 it was in St. Louis. I love this conference because there's a bunch of really amazing people, over 750 law enforcement educators and trainers from all over the world. They are simply the best of the best. And one of them that was gracious enough to sit down and have a chat with me was Todd Fletcher. And when I talk about being the best of the best, Todd is definitely that. In fact, he's so good at what he does, he was selected as the 2022 ILEETA Trainer-of-the-Year. Todd's a 30-year law enforcement veteran and longtime member of ILEETA. He's also the owner and lead instructor for Combative Firearms Training, which provides training for law enforcement firearms instructors from coast to coast. He has over 25 years of training experience as a firearms and a defensive tactics instructor. It makes sense that he's a member of the International Association of Law Enforcement Firearms Instructors, also known as IALEFI, which totally sounds Italian, right? IALEFI. Well, what you may not know is that beyond being a great firearms instructor, Todd's such a great marksman. He was the winner of the 2023 IALEFI Top Gun Award. Now, as the Robin Hood of public safety, taking the wisdom from those that have it and bringing it to those that need it, which is you, here's our de-escalation conversation, and in it is Todd Fletcher's wisdom. I know you're really going to enjoy hearing from him. Enjoy the show. So this morning, Todd Fletcher is with us. And Todd, you have such an amazing history as a trainer. And what I love to see is when people who are so skilled at their craft, who work as hard as you do, and have the abilities that you do, get honored. 2022 ILEETA, International Law Enforcement Educators and Trainers Association. We're here in St. Louis at the conference. 2022 Trainer of the Year. 2023 Emerson Hour speaker, and not just an Emerson Hour speaker, but the leadoff.
Yeah.
Just first at bat to set the pace for all of the other speakers.
No pressure there.
No pressure at all. No pressure at all. So I want to start there, and then we'll get to de-escalation in a little bit. But I want to, because there's so many trainers that listen to this podcast, and trainers in the K through 12 educational world, trainers in law enforcement, fire, medical services, flight attendants, that I want to spend just a little bit of time on the training component today. Tell me a little bit about your background, how long you've been a trainer, and maybe take a step back and talk about the journey that led you to become a trainer to begin with.
Well, I think really we'll start with the journey that led me there. I think that I've had some pretty amazing mentors in my life, going back to going through elementary school, middle school, high school. Had some really good coaches that took me under their wing, and I think were really good role models for me when it came to coaching, teaching, instructing others. And when I was going to college, I had a part-time job that one of the local middle schools hired me as a track coach. Then the following year, they hired me as the 7th grade head football coach while I was in college, not one of their teachers. And I think that was really the first time I actually experienced imposter syndrome too. But when I had those opportunities to start training, mentoring, coaching, counseling, these kids in athletics, that kind of started me down that path. And then when I got hired as a police officer, I had a little bit of a background in martial arts, and I was working for an agency at the time that they were looking for a defensive tactics instructor, and I was interested, but I was still on probation. And I'm like, I know I'm too young for this. I know I haven't earned this, but I would love the opportunity. And so the chief at the time, his name was Rod Brown at McMinnville Police Department. He said, all right, you can go to class, but you still have to work your shifts. And I was working nights at the time, and it was a 2-week-long defensive tactics class. And in hindsight, I think what he was doing was testing me. Do you really want this? Is this something that you want to do, or is it something you just don't want to work nights, right? And so my days off were in the middle of the week, and so I worked on that Sunday night. On Monday, went to class, got a few hours of sleep after class, went to work, and this happened, for 2 weeks. My days off in the middle of the week helped, right? So I got some rest, but I stuck it out. I got my defensive tactics instructor certification and became one of the DT instructors. And then later on became a field training officer. And I found that I loved helping others in that realm. And I knew that I wasn't very good at it. And I had a lot to learn because I had some really good field training officers when I was a field training officer, and I really looked up to them. I felt like I was constantly bugging them. How can I do this better? What am I missing? Right. Eventually became a firearms instructor. And I say eventually because I've never been a natural shooter. I've always been somebody who's really had to work hard at that craft, the application of shooting, and eventually did it. And that was back in 1996, 1997 time. And one thing led to another. I went to a different agency, got involved in all those other things, eventually took over as the use of force, lead use of force instructor, ran our training division, and it just kind of went from there. Even as when I changed to when I worked for Bend, Oregon Police Department, I had some mentors within the agency for sure. But I got to meet some amazing people like Mike Boyle, who at the time was on the board of directors for ILEFI. And he provided me with a lot of opportunities. Dennis Carroll, who was on the ILEFI board of directors, who's now an advisory board member with me here for ILEETA. And they provided these opportunities and guidance and mentoring. And really it's because of, I stand on the shoulders of those giants that I've had these opportunities that I've had this week and last year. So
that's an awesome journey. It sounds like every time there was an opportunity, you were there, you were taking it, and you were dedicated toward that, toward whatever it was. It really sounds like you were fully present at a lot of different times in your life, because oftentimes our ability to remain present varies.
Mm-hmm.
But just like getting your DTAC instructor certification, working graveyard shift at the same time, that's a lot of dedication, because those are long days when you're and long nights when you're heading back out into the field. That's pretty awesome. And
filled with sore muscles, getting up, being thrown down, getting up, being thrown down. It's it was rough. And man, I'm so glad I was in my 20s when that happened.
There's definitely something to be said for that.
Yeah, there is.
So let's talk about what you presented this week at ILEETA 2023.
Okay.
The class you did, and just kind of like, how did you come up with the title, the impetus behind all that?
So we focus on training instructors to be better. That's what we do with combative firearms training. We focus on law enforcement, private security, and military firearms instructor. We don't do training outside of that realm at all. When we were doing a class, it was a pistol-mounted optics class for Amarillo Police Department in Texas, and we were having a discussion about training standards. We were having a discussion in class during a break about what does it take for an instructor to be a better teacher, coach, mentor. It wasn't so much about the shooting part, but this little side discussion kind of led me to some ideas and kind of what we did this week in our live fire class. The live fire class was called Just Be Better. And that class, really, that's where that was born. Fast forward a couple months and we had another class in the Amarillo area, this time hosted by Potter County Sheriff's Office. It was a handgun instructor certification class, and totally different group of people. And that same discussion came up. How do we be better? How do we take our craft to the next level, both the classroom portion and the actual on the range performance of the instructor? And one of the guys in the class just blurted out, "Well, just be better." And I'm like, that's it. We don't really need to overcomplicate this. 3 words kind of explains it. And there's a lot of substance below those 3 words, of course. But that kind of distilled it down to its core essence. And that was the day that the idea of this class really was born. And what we did in the class was we talked about our leadership principles, which is a core part of our training. We talked about changing culture, how part of the problem with firearms instructors historically in U.S. and Canadian law enforcement in particular is that we refer to the guys that have always done what they've always done because that's what they know, that's what they were trained to do. Well, we've got 150 years of history showing that this isn't working. And our hit rates in U.S. and Canadian law enforcement gunfights are abysmal, and it's just not good enough. And so we refer to that guy, that instructor in our classes, as nothing more than a red shirt and a Sharpie, because they traditionally wear a red shirt, red hat. Hey, look at me, I separate myself from everybody else, got my Sharpies, go around and mark up everybody's target and do all that stuff. And really all they do they're evaluators and as opposed to teachers. And they're kind of stuck in that drill instructor mode, right? Yelling directions and all this other stuff. They're not really coaching, teaching, and reaching into people's minds and souls to get them to perform to the next level. Well, part of the reason is because that guy can't. He can't perform to that level, right? So Just Be Better started with those 2 classes, coincidentally in the same geographic area. And so Just Be Better, we focused even in this short 4-hour class on those leadership principles, on culture, on teaching, on reaching out and grabbing their minds, getting their minds actively involved in the process, and then not having time to get their conscious mind involved in the process so that their subconscious mind has to take over some of those skills, leaving their conscious mind open for other stuff like decision making. So that's what we did out on our range.
That's awesome. So can you give just a short example of how you incorporated leadership into a live fire exercise?
So again, our focus is the instructors, right? That's what we do. And as a firearms instructor, and everybody who's spent any time in law enforcement as a police officer, as a corrections officer, as a parole and probation officer, as a dispatcher, anybody who's ever spent time in this realm, when it comes to agency culture, everybody knows and understands who certain people are. They know who the field training officers are, right? They know who the sergeants are, the first line supervisors or the corporals. They also know who the firearms instructors are. A lot of them want to mimic the firearms instructors because it's, for a lot of people, it's a de facto leadership position, even from afar, for especially impressionable new officers. And as a firearms instructor, as a leader, they're watching, they're mimicking behavior, you know, right? They're recruiting those mirror neurons in the brain to mimic, are taking the model or the behavior that those instructors are modeling, and they're making it their own. So how they treat people, how they interact with other people, how they handle their firearm. But the most important element of that is that instructor is in a leadership position. And so the very first topic in all of our classes is leadership. How do we improve the culture of our agency through leadership? It goes back to what Brian Willis once said to me and Brian Hill and Joe Willis in ILEETA Live podcast. And that is, strong leadership at the base of the pyramid can negate poor leadership at the top of the pyramid. And he's right. You know, if we have leaders on the range, we have leaders on the street, officers, deputies, troopers, agents, that are leaders out on the street, we have strong sergeant leadership, then poor decision at the top is just briefing room fodder, right? It has less of an effect on us than we will even admit to ourselves. But instructors who are leaders on the range, in the DT room, you know, they set the culture of that agency, and they set the culture of learning for that department. And so when one of our principles of no bad teams, just bad leaders, when we have a good team of instructors, that team of instructors, that team of officers that we're training is going to be stronger. And instructors need to believe that what they do changes lives. Whether you're a firearms instructor, a DT instructor, we're in the business of saving lives, right? Saving lives by changing behavior, providing knowledge, skill, and ability, but also saving lives because what we do directly affects not just that officer, but the people that officer works with, that officer's family and who they're leaving at home, their moms, their dads, their brothers, their sisters, their aunt, uncles, and cousins, grandparents. It affects them all. And it affects the lives of the people in our community. So it's a domino effect of impact. And we don't know where those dominoes are going to lead. And so we've got to effect a positive experience as leaders on these people so that we have the greatest effect that we can on their lives while we've got them for the short period of time we've got them. So.
Yeah, that's really, really outstanding point, especially about the firearms instructors being de facto leaders. They're leaders without a leadership title because they're the experts. They're supposed to be the experts anyway.
Right.
And you look to those for just how should I be doing things? So let me ask you this. Is there an example of a leadership principle that you shared with the classes last week? You might have to give more than one because oftentimes they're interrelated, but can you give just one example of a leadership concept that you shared and how you shared that?
So one of our concepts is believe. I kind of just touched on it, but then that also goes into another one of our leadership concepts, which is check your ego. It's not about you. It's not about the red shirt and a Sharpie. Everything that you do should be very intentionally directed towards the student and that learning and retention of information. And it's not just learning and retention. How about learning, retention, and recall over time? I think that we get so focused in on performing a certain skill in a certain way during a certain space and time that we don't pay enough attention to the ability to recall it later and apply that same but same intentionality to that portion of learning. Again, we've been doing the same stuff we've always done. And the check your ego part of it comes right down to, no matter how good you are, you can be better, right? There's no end game here. It should be the constant pursuit of excellence. If as an instructor, you're not seeking out skill improvement, knowledge improvement, curriculum development improvement, those kinds of things on a regular basis, then the world's passing you by. And really get out, let the next generation come in and that is dedicated and has the time and energy to put into it, take over, because again, it's not about you. That ego part, especially as firearms instructors, a lot of firearms instructors get really wrapped up into having to be the best shooter on the range, and really nobody cares, right? You just need to be good enough to establish some base level of credibility. If you're a fantastic shooter, great, good on you. You put the time in for it. But nobody wants to see you demo every single drill. There are certain drills that you absolutely need to demo. There are drills that you don't. But we have instructors on both ends right now that because of ego, either will never do a demo for fear of failure in front of their students. That's ego. Or every class that they teach is about doing all the demos to the nth degree because they like to shoot and they want to prove to everybody that they're the best shooter on the range.
And they eat into student time shooting.
Yeah, can't do it. You got to use demos for the right reason, to benefit the students, give them behavior to model. And so we talk about that on Monday. We also talk about how you do those demos. If you, as an instructor, do demos at your speed, all the students are going to do is try to imitate the speed in which you did a demo. Not all of the processes and little things that you did in order to achieve that speed, right? It's all those little things that you did well that allow you to do it quickly. So all they're going to do is try to be fast. Well, we want them to be quick without being in a hurry. We want them to perform a drill in a certain period of time. For an example, let's say you have a drill that you want them to do in 10 seconds. That is the goal for some, for maybe the top 20% of your shooters, a 10-second drill, whatever the drill may be. Well, when you go up there and do the demo and you do it in 7.5 seconds, that's all they're going to remember is the speed in which you did it, right? But as an instructor, you need to be good enough to slow it down a little bit so that they can see the pace in which you're doing it and do that demo at that 10-second par time. Show them what they need to do to be successful, not show them that you're the best shooter on the range, because really nobody cares. It's not why you're there.
I think something that goes along with that is one of our teaching principles at IDEA with brain-centric design is that oftentimes when you're really skilled at something, let's say shooting, and you're teaching others that skill, you have worked out all the little kinks along the way to where you mentioned the subconscious taking over. And so you don't think about teaching how do you, the student, work through these kinks. You've done it. You actually forget about it. You shove it to the side. You're working on the final outcome, and they're going, wait a second, how do I get to that final outcome, because I'm not quite sure of the process.
Right.
The process has become so second nature to you because you're so skilled at it that you forget, oh yeah, I went through this learning curve, and you will too as a student. Let me help you through that learning curve.
Oh, sounds like some instructor empathy might be in order.
Just a little bit,
right? And I think that's an important point, because, for example, that whatever that drill was that we were just talking about, that 10-second drill, actually forcing yourself to slow down, get you back into that conscious part of your mind where I have to slow this down, because if I perform this in my subconscious mind, I'm going to be doing it too quick. So it forces you to slow down, and it truly does make some of these drills a lot more difficult. Because now you're thinking about things like the master grip out of the holster, how your draw and presentation, how you're recovering the sights after each shot, how you're transitioning between targets, how you're performing your reload and being very intentional about it, as opposed to how you would normally do it under time duress, because that all that movement, all that skill is in your subconscious mind. So now you're being very intentional about it, very deliberate about it, and it does change things. And as the instructor, well, just be better, right? Be able to do that. Practice your craft. Practice your craft to be better for your students. And on the empathy side of it, I mean, that is the start of empathy, right? Doing things for your students and for the benefit of your students. But one of the other things that we do in a lot of our classes is we teach some bilateral skills. If you're a right-handed instructor, there's a time in our classes where you're going to be doing everything as a left-handed shooter, whether it's a handgun, a shotgun, a rifle, whatever it may be. If you're a left-handed shooter and your arms are on backwards, then you're going to be now doing everything as a right-handed shooter. And then we do this, generally speaking, on the low light portion of our instructor certification classes, just before they get the flashlights out, right? And then we add flashlights to it after the light goes away. And what you find is that they are not only less skilled, but everything requires conscious effort. That when they start to go into that subconscious skill application, all of a sudden they start doing silly stuff. And we had one of the best shooters on the range, by the way. We were doing a class in Benton County, Oregon, where Oregon State University is. And we were doing this, and it was a handgun class. And his coach set up just a simple failure to fire malfunction. He's got a handheld flashlight in his hand, and the gun goes click, and he taps the top of the slide, tries to pull the magazine out as the rack portion of it, and then went back to another dead trigger, failure to fire. And he did this like 3 times. And his coach is like, no, tap the magazine. And he's like, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. Well, coincidentally, I actually was videoing it at the time. And I'm like, this is a gem, right? And at the end of that portion of our class, one of the things that I do is I gather everybody up and I ask them, how did that make you feel? And their answers are always along the lines of, man, I felt dumb. I felt like I didn't even know what I was doing. I felt like a new guy, somebody who struggles on the range, somebody who's learning these skills for the first time, somebody who's learning how to balance a handheld flashlight in their hand at the same time that they're shooting, doing reloads, clearing malfunctions, and it clicks. Like, now you remember what it felt like to be the new guy, the person who was struggling. And I think that level of empathy gives instructors an ability to not only relate, but it improves the patience that they have with a struggling student. And ultimately, that guy matters.
Yeah.
So.
And it makes the instructor a better instructor.
I think so. I think that instructors who can empathize with their class, their students, are going to do more to reach deeper into those students' ability. So,
yeah, awesome examples. Thank you, Todd. Let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about Emerson Hour.
Okay. You
were selected in 2022. You got an email, or Joe Willis talked to you about it. However, you got notified. How much time did you have to prepare, and what was that preparation process like for you? And for our listeners, the Emerson Hour is 9 minutes, almost like a TED Talk, but half the time. And everybody knows as soon as you start compressing the amount of time that you have to share your message. It is so much harder. Mark Twain, back in the day, even talked about how hard it was to deliver a message in a little bit of time, little bit of space in writing. So to be able to deliver a message in 9 minutes or less, talk to us about how much time you had to prepare. What was that process like? What was your practicing like? Selecting your topic even must have been hard. And I'm just going to throw one more thing in there. If you happen to remember to answer it, if not, I'll ask you again. But when did you find out you're going to be number one?
Well, I'll just talk about the process, which will lead me to that point. So Joe sent me an email, I believe it was in September, asking me if I would be willing to present during Emerson Hour. And he had dropped several hints along the way to, leading up to that point. And so periodically during the year, I was thinking about, man, what am I going to talk about? I've only got 9 minutes. What am I going to talk about? What is become more clear to me since we last met, right? And so 3 months into the year, 4 months into the year, nothing, of course, has become more clear to me. And then I get this email. I'm like, I got to come up with something. What is it going to be? What is it going to be? And as soon as I read that email, there's a lot of people that have said, you're going to get that email and it's going to freak you out. They aren't wrong. And then B, once you get that email, you're going to be stressed out until Emerson Hour. And they are not wrong.
So roughly 6 months, 7 months
of kind of mental anguish. But during that time, I kept asking myself, what has become more clear since we last met at ILEETA? What has become more clear since we last met at ILEETA? And I kept seeing these stories about how the state of Ohio is lowering standards by eliminating a physical fitness portion of pre-academy screening and hiring. That 2 of the 5 officers involved in the Memphis incident had criminal histories or arrest records. That the state of Oregon is not having a criminal history in the state of Oregon is no longer going to be an instant disqualifier for employment as a police officer. I was like, you got to be kidding me. So we're going to lower our standards. And I understand that there are agencies throughout the country that are working short. They're having a difficult time recruiting and retaining people. I get that. But lowering our standards isn't the solution. And what I mean by that is, especially in the case of the criminal history disqualifiers, now you have a person, a candidate, that has a documented history of making bad decisions that is going to go into a profession where all they do is make decisions.
In really critical decisions like, should I kill this person or not?
Right.
Should I take away their freedom?
Right. Taking away, having the authority to take somebody's civil rights or suspend them at least temporarily without judicial oversight on that initial decision. I mean, that is a huge amount of authority, and we're going to hire people with a documented history of making bad decisions. How is this even possible? And I kept hearing little stories like, yeah, my chief says we're not going to lower any of our standards. And he came to me, this is literally a phone call. He came and threw a background investigation packet on my desk and said, could you get this back to me in 3 days? What do I do? I said, well, and this was on a candidate that they had given a conditional job hire to that lived in another state. And so I asked this officer who was calling me. I said, why is this important to you? And he gave the Emerson Hour speech.
Nice.
And so I told him, I said, hey, I think that what you need to do is you need to explain to the chief that a background investigation can be done in 3 days, especially if you have nothing else that you're going to focus on during that time. But a background investigation done in 3 days isn't going to be done well. And he can either have it quickly or he can have it done well. And if he says, I want it in 3 days, follow it up with an email saying, just to clarify, I want to, you want this in 3 days, that I'm not going to have any travel time to go out of state to talk to neighbors, relatives, these kinds of things. These are all going to be done on the phone, hopefully within 3 days, because I've got some other ideas, and outline some ideas that you didn't speak about when you spoke to him in person. And then if he comes back and says, I want it in 3 days, then he's made that decision. He has assumed that level of responsibility, and then do the best job that you possibly can to uncover as much information as you possibly can. Do the best job that you can. It's all we can ask of you. But it got me leading down that road. And so in preparation, I made some notes, disregarded all those notes, made some new notes, threw those away, said, this isn't working doing it on my computer. Maybe if I write down my thoughts on paper, and I have that more physical experience making notes, maybe that'll help. Well, those got thrown away. But eventually I had some ideas that I wanted to cover based on that conversation. And so I'd be in my office doing something, and then I would set my cell phone timer up and start doing my presentation. And it evolved. It went from like 14 minutes to 6. It went to back up to 12 minutes. And eventually I kind of got it right there about that 8.5 minute mark. And I'm like, okay, I'm kind of happy with that, but I'm unhappy with this portion of it. And this continued for months, literally right up until while I was teaching on the range on Monday. So I would brief a drill. If it was a drill that needed a demo, I would demo the drill. I would get back behind the line, everybody make ready, put them through the drill. And while they're shooting, I'm trying to monitor what's going on the range. And at the same time, I'm mentally going over what I'm going to say during Emerson Hour. And then I was like, oh, they're done shooting. And now, okay, now we're going to do it at this distance. And, and while you're doing that, I'm going to be inside my own mind trying to figure out what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it.
In a matter of hours.
Yeah. And we got done out at the range. And just like any class that you teach, and it doesn't matter if it's firearms, if it's curriculum design, or whatever it may be, there are people that want to talk to you about the individual questions, and those questions are critical, right? They are part of your class. And so class gets done, we get all the brass picked up. I'm handing out business cards and shaking hands and thanking everybody for being with us and answering individual questions. And then some of the guys or one of the guys, Billy Etheridge, who's one of our adjunct instructors, like, let's go. He's like, what's going on? I said, let's go. I want to go back and shower before Emerson Hour. And he's just kind of milling around, and he's a very social person. And I'm like, let's go, come on, Billy. And I can't tell him why. We have to get back to the hotel. So we get back here, and I jump in the shower real quick, and I said, well, let's go down. And this is right at 6 o'clock. Emerson Hour started at 7. We go down into the room, and I say, hey, why don't you save some seats right up front so we can have seats, because one of the things about Emerson Hour is you run out of seats fairly quickly once that 7 o'clock hour approaches. So I'll be right back. And so Joe Willis had asked all of the Emerson Hour presenters to meet in a certain area, a certain room. And that was the first time that I got to see who the other people were. Oh, wow. And it was funny. I walked in there, and it was like, I instantly relaxed, because it was a group of people that I have utmost respect for, and I'm comfortable with. And it reminded me that ILEETA is a place where everybody here, whether you're teaching a class, presenting a class, whether you're here just simply taking classes, as the most important people in our conference, whether you're conference staff, whether you're on the advisory board, whether you're one of the volunteers, everybody here wants to see you succeed, right? Everybody here is rooting for you, right? Very positive energy kind of way. And I walked in there and I saw Kim Schlau, who is one of these people with just a lot of personality and charisma, and just sweet. Tracy Cepeda, who is somebody that has had struggles in her career and her personal life, and has overcome those, and was going to share that with us during Emerson Hour. Very powerful personal story. Tim Janowick, who has been in the Ukraine as a police advisor for the last 5 years, helping to reform the Ukrainian National Police, how they train, their training curriculum, all their training resources, and now doing that in the middle of a war. And then Alexander from Ukraine, who I hadn't met before, Michael Warren from Virtual Academy. I walk in there, I'm seeing these people, I'm like, okay, I feel much better. I sit down, I'm finishing a bottle of water, and I'm starting to relax and having side conversations with everybody. And hey, it's great to see you. I haven't seen Tim in 5 years, because he was in the Ukraine. And Joe comes in, and we're having a good time and laughing and enjoying the moment. And he comes in and he says, okay, here's the order of things. He says, Todd, you'll be first. I'm like, oh, there goes my stress level once again. I was starting to relax, and now all of a sudden it was like, okay, I need to sit down, because I need to start, because I literally found myself holding my breath. I sat down, engaged in some box breathing, trying to find a way to relax those stress hormones, right? And it worked, because I stood up, and Tim Janowick gives me a big hug, and Kim gives me a big hug. And so we move over to the room, and Billy's over there, and the room's starting to fill up, and I sit down and began having conversations with some other people around there. And then Joe stands up and gives his opening remarks and introduces me, and Billy slaps me and says, really? Couldn't have shared with me? Nope. So that was my Emerson Hour journey, and it was definitely a journey. So
very cool. Well, you did a top-notch job that night. I was
thank you.
to be in the room when you were talking, and your preparation paid off. You impacted people. You really did.
Thank you.
So, brother, I'm gonna have to have you back, because we're running out of time right now, and I love the conversation about training and your approach and how you handle things. You truly are just a top-notch trainer, top-notch mentor, top-notch coach. You really just knock it out of the park. And
I appreciate it.
Grateful for you being here. Thank you for honoring us with your time on we're doing this recording on early Saturday morning. The conference is winding down. Everybody's starting to head home, and you're here still just supporting people. So thank you very much for being here.
I'm going to go from here to a class and see if I can pick up a few more nuggets before I have to catch an airplane home.
Well, that's one of the things that I really admire about you, is you don't just come here and train. You come here and take classes. You were in my class earlier this week,
and it was a phenomenal experience.
Thank you.
So
I appreciate that. So actually, I have a gift for you. So the Idea Challenge coin. So thank you for being here.
I appreciate it.
And thank you for being part of ILEETA and doing all the wonderful things that you do. So
thank you.
For our listeners, make sure you check out Todd's information. It's in the show notes for how you can stay in touch with him. And anytime that he's in your area, if you have a chance to take one of his classes, just, even if you're working graveyard shift, go during the day and do it. Just like when he became a DTAC instructor. He's a fantastic trainer, and you'll learn a lot from him, there's no doubt. And if you're not a member of ILEETA and you're law enforcement, you're a trainer, then definitely check ILEETA out. Until next time, please stay safe. I hope you found a lot of great value in this episode of the De-Escalation Conversations podcast. Please be sure to go out to our website, theidea.world, THEIDEA.world. On that website, just click on the link that resonates with you most. If you're a K-12 educator, if you're a firefighter, medical services, law enforcement, flight attendants, whatever industry you're in, we have specialized training for you. So check that training out, because literally it can save your life, it can save your relationship, it can save your career. So check out theidea.world. I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Take care. This is Kerry Mintz here, and thanks for watching this episode of the De-Escalation Conversations podcast. I hope you got some great insights that you can use right away. But don't stop here. Click that video link above and keep the momentum going with another powerful episode. And hey, if you haven't already, please hit that like button and the subscribe bell so you never miss an episode. New strategies, new stories, and new ways to connect coming your way every week. See you in the next episode.